Pedro Fages, original name Pere Fages y Beleta, nicknamed Elos, was a Spanish soldier, explorer, first lieutenant governor of the Californias under Gaspar de Portolá, and second and fifth governor of Alta California. Career. Fages was born in Gisona, Lerida, Lleida Province, Catalonia, Spain. In 1762, he entered the light infantry in Catalonia in 1762 and joined Spain's invasion of Portugal during the 7 Years' War. In May 1767, Fages, commissioned as a lieutenant in the newly formed Free Company of Volunteers of Catalonia, set sail from Cadiz along with a company of light infantry, voyaging to New Spain. He and his men served under Domingo Elizondo in Sonora, voyage from Baja California to San Diego. In 1769, Fages was selected by Visitador José de Galvez to lead the ship-borne portion of the Gaspar de Portolá-led expedition to found San Diego, California. Lieutenant Fages sailed from Guaymas to the Baja California port of La Paz. Then on January 9, 1769, he boarded the galleon San Carlos, captained by Vicente Vila and bound for San Diego. Also on board were Franciscan friar Fernando Paran, engineer and cartographer Miguel Costanzo, surgeon Pedro Prat, and 25 soldiers under Fages' command along with a crew of sailors. After sailing nearly 200 miles beyond San Diego due to cartography errors, the San Carlos doubled back south. It finally arrived in San Diego Bay on April 29, with scurvy-ridden troops and crewmen. Interaction with Kumeyaay Indians. Upon recovering from the ill effects of the voyage, Fages set about carrying out the instructions of José de Galvez. Along with Miguel Costanzo, he reconnoitered the port and inland areas of San Diego, exploring especially today's Mission Valley. In his letter reporting to Galvez, Fages observed of the local Kumeyaay Indians, "They appear to be docile and alert. We have made very good friends with them and we are never lacking some little rabbits, hares, and fish that they bring to us. We give them some glass beads, but they value very highly any kind of cloth, no matter how poor it might be, since in exchange for some that I had, I received some furs and nets." Costanzo, while branding the Kumeyaay as lazy idlers, noted that they have bestowed great affection upon Don Pedro Fages and they also respect him very much. They have invited him at various times to be with the women, an expression of friendship that the rest have not merited. Costanzo recounts a demonstration Fages arranged to prove the superiority of Spanish firearms. Armed with bows and arrows tipped with very sharp flints, the Kumeyaay men initially viewed the Spaniards' guns as simple sticks. Fages ordered a leather target erected at a practical distance. The Indians fired their arrows, which had only a mild effect on the leather. Fages then ordered his best marksman to shoot at the same target. Upon hearing the noise and seeing the destruction so close at hand, the Indians changed their expressions and some of the more timid ones left, giving very clear signs of the surprise and fear. Portola expedition up the California coast. On July 14, 1769, Fages set out from San Diego with a party of 74 men on the Portola expedition to locate Monterey Bay. The party included Catalonian volunteers, leather-jacketed soldiers, Christian Indians from Baja California, and Friars Juan Crespi and Francisco Gomez along with other military officers. During this time he was promoted to captain. Although the party failed to recognize Monterey Bay as they passed it, they explored all the way up the coast to San Francisco. The 74 men returned exhausted to San Diego on January 24, 1770, having had to slaughter and eat the mules on the return trek south. Second Portola expedition to Monterey. In the spring of 1770, Fages joined the Second Overland Portola expedition from San Diego to Monterey, along with Fray Juan Crespi, 12 Catalonian volunteers, 7 leather-jacketed soldiers, 2 muleteers, and 5 Baja Christian Indians, aiming to establish a Catholic mission in Monterey. After Portola left California in 1770, Captain Pedro Fages was left in charge of the Presidio of Monterey, as the somewhat independent Lieutenant Governor of California Nueva, which in 1770 became part of Las Californias, and was later split from Baja California to become Alta California. In March of 1770, Felipe de Barry, in Baja California, was made governor of both Baja and Alta California. But, since Monterey was far away, Fages had free rein to run Alta as acting governor. Strict discipline to build Monterey Presidio. Taking charge of constructing the Spanish Presidio in Monterey, Fages imposed strict discipline on his soldier laborers. He decided the amount of work they had to do in a certain time, harshly punishing soldiers caught resting or rolling a cigarette. Heavy rains punctuated the spring and winter of 1771, but Fages permitted no let-up in the work. His soldiers had to trudge through mud to the forest to chop wood, then drag the mules out of the mud and head home. They had no chance to wash or mend their clothes during the 6-day work week. Fages told them to do that on Sundays. Also on Sundays, they had to carry a week's supply of wood for Fages' kitchen and fetch their own water from the Carmel River some 6 miles away, clean their weapons, and pass inspection. This work regime lasted a year and a half, until complaints by the soldiers persuaded Padre President Junipero Serra to intervene. Serra told Fages that, as a Christian, he had to observe the Sabbath and let his men rest on Sundays. Weekly rations from the soldiers consisted of 2 gallons of corn, a pound of beans, a pound of pinole, half a pound of panocha, and 4 pounds of meat. The meat, delivered in barrels from the galleon San Antonio, are often proved too putrid to eat. Weevils infested some of the corn and meal. The soldiers supplemented the diet by gathering wild herbs and hunting geese on Sundays. In late June 1771, Fages wrote to Viceroy Carlos de Coy in Mexico to inform him that the Monterey Presidio had been built, sending along a simplified map. Fages had also started a large vegetable garden with an irrigation supply, and 3 plots dedicated to growing wheat, barley, rice and beans. He described the Indians of the Monterey, Carmel area as having well-proportioned bodies but feeble spirits. Expeditions to San Francisco Bay. In November 1770, Fages led an expedition from Monterey by land to explore the east side of San Francisco Bay. Rather than follow Portola's difficult trail around Monterey Bay to Santa Cruz and along the coast, Fages found an easier route through present-day Salinas and the Santa Clara Valley. Fages' new trail became the preferred route, and missions were later established along that road at Mission San Juan Bautista, Mission Santa Clara and Mission San Jose. Fages set out again in 1772, following his own trail north, but pushed on past his previous stopping point, accompanied this time by Fray Juan Crespi, who kept a daily journal. The party skirted San Pablo Bay but were prevented from going farther north by the Carquinez Strait. Following the bay around to the east, Fages' group climbed the slopes of Mount Diablo and became the first Europeans to see the Sacramento-San Joaquin River Delta, the Central Valley of California and the Sierra Nevada mountain range. Seeing that it was impossible to cross the wide river without boats, the party looped around to return to San Jose through today's Contra Costa County. Fages earned his nickname Elos while hunting bears near San Luis Obispo. He quarreled with Father Junipero Serra, president of the Alta California missions, and was replaced as lieutenant governor by Fernando Rivera y Moncada in 1774. In 1777 Fages returned to Sonora to fight the Apaches, where he was promoted to lieutenant colonel. In 1781 he successfully quelled the Quechan Indian revolt and temporarily reopened the Colorado River crossing of the Anza Trail at Yuma, Arizona. The Quechan successfully reclosed the trail for the next 50-plus years after he and his troops departed. Pedro Fages was appointed governor of Las Californias in 1782, replacing Felipe de Neve. He returned to Monterey, which had replaced Loreto as the capital of the Californias in 1777. During Fages' tenure as governor the second time, two missions were founded, Mission Santa Barbara and La Purísima Mission. Reporting on the Mission Carmel Indians in 1787, Fages described the area's Indians as the laziest, most brutish and least rational of all the natives discovered between San Diego and Francisco. He reckoned those qualities, along with the foggy and windy climate, shortage of potable water, high death rate, and language barriers, accounted for the painfully slow progress of Mission Carmel. Concerned over the shortage of skilled artisans in his domain, Governor Fages proposed in 1787 that artisans imprisoned in Mexico City and Guadalajara have their sentences commuted to exile in California, provided they serve out the terms at Presidios or missions and then stay on as settlers. New Spain's rulers did not act on Fages' proposal. Fages was promoted to colonel in 1789, and resigned his governorship in 1791, at the request of Father Serra. Pedro Fages moved back to Mexico City, where he died in 1794. Tumultuous Marriage. Fages married Eulalia Francesca Josefa Callas on June 3, 1780 in Mexico City. Born October 4, 1758 in Barcelona, Spain, Eulalia was a full generation younger than Pedro Fages. She journeyed to Mexico City with her mother and brother to join her father Agustin Callas, captain of the Free Company of Volunteers of Catalonia formed to suppress rebellions by Pima and Seri Indians of Sonora. In 1781, Eulalia and Pedro traveled to Arizpe, Sonora, where Eulalia gave birth to her first child, Pedrito. When Fages got reassigned to Alta California as governor in 1782, Eulalia and Pedrito remained in Sonora. Then they traveled to Baja California under military escort. Fages journeyed south to Loreto to pick them up. Departing Loreto in July, they arrived in Monterey in January 1783. In the spring of 1784 Pedro and Eulalia, now pregnant, traveled north, Eulalia being carried in a litter to San Francisco. That they met up with Padre President Junipero Serra. Eulalia found the weather in San Francisco unpleasant and wanted to move to Santa Clara. Fages repeatedly asked the friars running Mission Santa Clara to grant Eulalia hospitality there. The friars, feeling it improper for them to host the pregnant Senora Gobernadora, feigned ignorance of Governor Fages' insistent requests. They referred the matter to Padre Serra, who seconded the circumspect posture. So Eulalia's second child, Maria del Carmen, was born in San Francisco in August 1783. But let a woman in your life. After Eulalia returned to Monterey from San Francisco, she kept pressing her husband to give up his career in California and return to Mexico. Fages wanted to stay on as governor. After a series of quarrels, Eulalia broke off relations with Pedro. When Pedro seemed unfazed by the separation, Eulalia accused him of consorting with an Indian maidservant of the household. Threatening divorce, Eulalia left the house. In February 1785, Fages sought the advice of the friars at Mission Carmel. Friar Machas de Santa Catalina Noriega concluded that Eulalia still had the obligation to live with her husband and tried to persuade her to reunite with Pedro. Eulalia refused, and appealed her case to the bishop. When Fages returned from a trip to Baja California, during which time Eulalia lived at Mission Carmel, she finally agreed to move back into her husband's house. In August 1785, aging Fray Francisco Palu arrived at Monterey from Mission Santa Clara, planning to return to Mexico and retire. Fages confided to Palu that Eulalia still felt unhappy in his house and still wanted to return to Mexico. He asked Palu to escort Eulalia as far as Guadalajara. Palu objected that it would be improper for him, a missionary, to escort any woman, even the governor's wife. Instead, Palu spent a whole day trying to dissuade Eulalia from going to Mexico, pointing out all the hardships the trip would entail. Eulalia finally relented and agreed to stay in Monterey. Apparently dissatisfied with that resolution, Fages threw bureaucratic obstacles in the way of Palu boarding the ship that would carry him to Mexico, delaying Palu's departure until November. Reconciliation. In January 1787, Fages wrote a letter to Padre Palu, in which he reported, "6 months ago Eulalia suddenly called me one morning with 1,000 protests, tears, and humility and asked my pardon for all the past. She voluntarily confessed that everything had been a pretense and falsehood and that she herself had bribed the Indian girl to take part in the plot. Thank God we are now living in union and harmony." Fictional portrayals. The novel Mistress of Monterrey, a story of lost romance in 18th-century California by Virginia Stivers Bartlett, draws a psychological portrait of Eulalia Callas in her mercurial relationship with her husband Pedro Fages. Bartlett also sets the tensions between Eulalia and Pedro within the complex interplay between Spanish military officers and Franciscan missionaries. In Alta California, Pedro Fages appears as a minor character in the 1955 film 7 Cities of Gold, which presents a fanciful and historically inaccurate account of the founding of Spanish California. Lieutenant Fages is played by Mexican actor Victor Junco. In the credits, Fages' name is misspelled as Faces. Governor Fages and his wife make a brief appearance in the Isabel Allende novel Zorro. Pere Fages is the protagonist of the historical novel La Última Conquista by Ramon Villaro and is a secondary character in Los Acasos by Javier Pascual.